You're never going to be sure if you're ready to have a baby. But I've came across a checklist that you should read prior to having a child. So stay tuned so we could talk about it. Hello again, everyone. This is Sanity with Bass, Broken Adult Speak Sense. And today I'm going to be talking about a checklist I came across that could help you decide whether you're ready to have a child or not. Because there's so many unplanned babies, so many babies, including myself. I didn't think before I had a child, as you've seen in my previous episodes. So my experience when I was a child, I always remember the women in my family falling in love, getting married, and having children. That's what I always saw. And some of them had, for upwards to like 10 or more kids. They just, it's not something they thought about. It's something that they just did. If they were married, they got pregnant and had kids. Then later after my childhood, when I became a preteen and started middle school, I went to a school, and I don't know if this is still like that, hopefully not, where almost all the girls would talk about is having sex with their boyfriend already in middle school. And some of them already have babies at middle school. You're talking about 15 years and under 15 years, because I believe you're 15 years old when you're in ninth grade. And when I went from middle school to high school, it got even worse. The girls would always talk about hooking up with somebody, how they wanted to become someone's baby mama. It was kind of like a trophy to carry around. There was a lot of teenage pregnancy around. Some of the teenage girls had 1, 2, 3 kids already. And I hate to say it, but as I became an adult, that process didn't change. Granted, it was married people or couples that were dating at that time, steady dating, but no one ever thought through or considered factors or things you should take into consideration prior to having children. They just had them. No matter if their relationship was bad, if they didn't have enough funds to do it, if they didn't have the education enough to handle to learn about how to raise a child, or to cope with their emotions. I'm talking about myself as well. So I was too one of those adults that I fell in love, got married, and when I say love, I mean love, open quotes, close quotes, because we all say we're in love, but a lot of us don't know what love is. And we get married. I got married, and I had children. There was no birth control thought about, nothing like that. It was just something that just had to happen right away after you got married. So I got married at 18 years old, as I mentioned in my previous episodes. And by the time I was 20, I was already pregnant. And when I was 21, I had my first child. And I would have had her sooner if there was not a problem with me not being able to have children for some reason. When we first got married, we went a couple of years. We went like 3 years with no preventing children, and I ended up getting pregnant. So just put it this way, I wasn't trying to prevent having a child. One of the things that I've always known, and I don't regret, is I always wanted to be a mother. I knew I always wanted to be a mother since I was younger. I already had my first child's name picked out in high school. I knew what her first name and her middle name was going to be. I knew I wanted 2 children. There's some parents that they have children only because their partner wants to have a child, and they just kind of give in. I wasn't one of those people. I really wanted my children. I just didn't think through everything else, all the other factors that are very, very, very important before I had a child. Another thing I was always sure about is I wanted to go to college. I always wanted to go to college, so I tried to stay focused in school and get good grades and try to learn stuff, because I knew I wanted to become a dentist one day. At least that's what I was going to want to become. I never went to school for that. And if you watch my first episode, you'll see why that happened. But either way, I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to have 2 children. That I was sure about. I knew I wanted to have a good job. I didn't want to be dependent on anyone. If it's one thing that I've always listened to my mom about is don't be dependent on a man. Don't be dependent on anybody. And I took her advice. I always wanted to go to school, specialize in something, get a high paying job or a good paying job and work my way up. So I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't have any money. So I researched what's the best way to get money to go to college. And I came up with the military. So I joined the Army so I could get the GI Bill right after I got out. And I actually started doing some of my training while I was still in the military. I started doing some of my core classes like English, math, history, because at that point when I don't know if it's the same still, but when you're in the military and if you're still enlisted, they pay full time for your school and they don't take away from your GI Bill at that point. That doesn't come out of your GI Bill. After I got out of the Army, I researched how to fill out the form to get my GI Bill. And I researched colleges near me to see which one I wanted to go to. I went to see a counselor to talk to him and asked him basically, at that point, I wanted the career that gave me the best money in the shortest amount of time. So I didn't really, kind of go into a field of my passion. Actually, this is my passion now, this podcast. I just wanted to have something that I could support my family with or help bring money in to help my family, because at that time I had my daughter and I was married to my ex-husband and we were both getting out of the military. So the counselor said, well, that's information technology. So I studied for the test to get into the college, the placement test. I researched all that stuff. I paid attention in class because I wanted to be successful in the job market. I wanted people to want to hire me. I figure out what you needed to do in information technology to stand out. And that was certifications. So I got certifications. After I was done with my associate's degree in computer science, I had to get a job. So I hired a technical writer to help me with a resume. After that, I had to learn how to do a good interview. So I researched what are the main questions interviewers ask to interviewees. And I had my ex-husband interview me over and over again. So after that, I got a couple of other jobs. And through that, I was getting experience. I was paying attention at work to build my knowledge. But that wasn't enough. I had to compete in the information technology world. I had to go back to school and get my bachelor's degree and get more certifications. And I moved my way up the ladder to better and better jobs. And I finally got my bachelor's degree in computer science. Why am I saying all this? Why am I even going through all this, explaining my life and my successes at school? This is not to brag. This is to make a point. My point is that I knew where I wanted to go in my career, so I took those steps to get there as far as education, certifications, preparing, had someone help me to, prepare for interviews and everything that goes with that, sought help from professionals to help me create a resume so I could get a job. I even hired temp agencies to help me find a job because they had the database of everyone that was hiring. But when it came to me wanting a child, I did not do any research. I did not do any education. I did not do any continued education. I didn't do anything. I just had my children. And honestly, trying to be a parent without doing all those things is honestly like an actor being put on the set without learning the script first. It's like going out there blindfolded, like walking in the street blindfolded and hope for the best that you don't get run over by a car. And a lot of people don't do this either. And that's mostly what my podcast is based on, is to try to bring awareness of these things, because you could still do something after you have children, but it's so much better if you just plan prior to having them to avoid making mistakes and causing your children childhood trauma. So it's too late for me to go back and learn all these things and do things all over again. But I don't want you guys to get discouraged if you already have had children and are struggling like I was, or have adult children like me and are struggling with your relationship because you didn't do it the first time, like I didn't do it right the first time. If you watch my previous episode where I interview my daughter, you'll see that it is possible to mend relationships. You just got to be willing to listen and apologize for the part you played in the trauma they had when they were children. So I went and looked for anybody that was covering this subject because I'm not a professional. So I wanted to see if a professional was out there talking about this subject to try to help you guys. So I came across a book called The Baby Decision by Merle Bombardieri. So Merle specializes in parenthood decision making, infertility, adoption, and giving people the tools to make the best of a life with or without children. Merle has been a private practice clinical social worker and psychotherapist for over 35 years. So she has had decades of experience with this. And so she knows what she's talking about. She has helped many couples to decide whether they want to have children, whether or not to have children. She's dealt with just a whole bunch of different scenarios as far as it comes to deciding to have children. So Merle, while she still maintains, it says in her website, while she still maintains a small psychotherapy practice, she switched her focus to coaching so that she could assist as many people as possible in parenthood decision making. And she's also coming out with another book this coming year called Baby or Child Free: Deciding in the Face of Climate Change, Fear of Missing Out, Regret, Pregnancy, Fair Role Sharing, and Other Concerns. And I cannot wait till this book comes out because I want to read and talk about it as well. And like I said, I try to look for a professional that's talking about this subject for a while, and she's on top of it. I have not found anybody else that has had more experience or done more research than her. So if you are on the fence whether to have a child or not to have a child, I do highly recommend getting her book, The Baby Decision. Christmas is coming around the corner as well. If you want to go ahead and buy the book and gift it to somebody you think it would benefit. Since this podcast is based on childhood trauma, I'm going to focus on a checklist she has on her book called Are You Ready for Parenthood? I honestly think that this checklist that she has on her website and her book should be turned into like a book that is required to be read by high schoolers and or turn into a whole class, honestly, because between that and finances, those are some of the things that really our children should be learning. Because when they make the wrong decision about having a child, it affects everybody, including society as a whole. All right, so let me talk about the checklist. First thing on the checklist she talks about that you should consider prior to having a child is ask yourself, am I excited about bringing a child into my life, even if sometimes it scares me? Now, this one I could check off because I was super excited to have 2 children in my life. I was super excited. There was nothing like someone try to convince me to have a child. There was nothing like, oh, I'll have a child so you won't leave me. There was nothing like that. I've always wanted to have children. The second thing that you should ask yourself before having children, if you're considering it, is do I or we, if you have a partner, have a good support system of family and or friends? Now this one, and most of them, I was laughing at this when I was going through this list because honestly, I could hardly check any of these off right now even, but especially before I had children. I did not have a good support system at all. As you know, my husband and my ex-husband and I went into the Army and we got stationed many states away from family. So we were isolated by ourselves, and we didn't have anybody to help. And whenever I got a divorce, I tried to stay around the same area to allow my daughter's father to have a chance to see them. But honestly, I should have moved closer to home because it was terrible trying to do it on my own. As a matter of fact, as many of you know that have children, when they're in school, you have to come up with an emergency contact. Well, that emergency contact for me was our technical assistant in the front desk in my company because I didn't have no one else because their father, he was not dependable. So if there was an emergency and I couldn't leave work, they would call her to come get me where I was in my company and let me know of that emergency. So yeah, that definitely was that's not checked. So the third thing that Merle talks about in her book that you should consider before having a child is, even if finances are difficult, we have a safe, adequate place to live. We have the ability to provide our child with basics such as food, clothing, and medical care. Now, this is probably one of the few I could check off too. I did have a safe and adequate place to live for my children. And I did have the basics such as food and clothing and medical care because my job always covered medical. Thank God I got jobs with medical coverage. The fourth thing is I can protect my child from harm by keeping him away from violent or abusive people, including family members. And see, this is one thing that I think about because I had people in my family that did wrong things to children without being detailed. And I was always looking out for that. But it just always surprises me how trusting some people are with uncles, aunts, grandparents, cousins. They're just very trusting with anybody just because they're family. Please don't do that. Try to always be around with your children and don't leave them alone with anybody just because they're family members. You don't ever know what could happen to your child. You don't ever know what someone's getting into. So, and then there's those people that have a partner that hit your child as well. If you're in a abusive relationship, don't have a child with them. Because even if they don't hit that child's going to see them hit you, mentally or physically abuse you. So make sure that you got that checked off. The next one is, I am willing to seek medical care and counseling for my child when needed. Now, this right here is, you might be willing to seek medical care and counseling for your child, especially counseling, but a lot of us don't have the money to do it. And that's why you should have the money before you have a child, which it talks about later on in this list, because that's one of the things you should consider. Because like I said in my previous episodes, everyone always thinks about the best case scenario when they have a child. And they just think they're just going to go to school. I'm just going to have to pay for field trips and fees and daycare, and everything else is going to be hunky-dory. But that's not the case. Your kids get anxiety, they get bullied, and other things, and where they might need to talk to somebody, and you want them to talk to somebody, but you do not have the funds. So this one is, I guess, halfway checked off for me because I was willing, but I didn't have the money for counseling. I am willing. I already read that one. I am in reasonably good health. If I have chronic illness, it is well managed with medicine and or self-care. So a lot of people think you got to be in the most perfect health, but what Merle is saying here is that if it is well managed with medicine and some kind of diet you're doing, you're trying to improve your health to try to get yourself healthier, by all means have a child. But if you're not taking care of your health and you're sick and you're not change your lifestyle or getting treatment for it, how are you gonna take care of a child if you're not if you can even take care of yourself if you're sick. The next thing on the checklist is I'm relatively happy and mentally healthy. So this one I cannot check off at all. I'm not even gonna lie. I was not relatively happy or mentally healthy before I had a child. Now I had a wall up like I was, and that's one of the things that people with trauma do. They're in denial or have a wall up like they're strong. Something happened to them, but they're over it and they're okay and they're healed. And that is not true. You definitely need healing to get all those things out and have that under control. So it says, I am relatively happy and mentally healthy. I am not so anxious or depressed that I'm unable to care for myself, work, or be in a relationship. I know how to control and deal with my anger without lashing out verbally or physically. This whole line right here, I cannot check out, or I couldn't check out back then. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was not happy. I was not mentally healthy. I was able to take care of myself. That's about it. I used to lash out verbally with anger and sometimes physically. Where was this list before I had children? I just don't understand. This is so important. I don't understand. I wish we had these tools. I wish my mom had these tools growing up. But that's just the way it has been. We have learned so much about children and children's mind that we're improving now, and there's more awareness on how to deal with things and be better parents. And hopefully I'll make a difference as well. And that's what my podcast is about. I have a big heart for children, and I'm trying to protect them from being born to a place where they're not going to be loved and they're going to be abused. So the next list here, and I can't check this one either off, or I guess, let me read it. I understand that even happy, healthy children have moments of irrationality, tantrums, rage, and fear. In the first year of life, I know that I will be faced with crying, jags, wet and dirty diapers, and interrupted sleep. Now, I kind of knew this because one of my younger sisters, she was a difficult baby. And I helped my mom with her because I was already a teenager. So I would, grab her and try to put her to sleep and stuff like that. It's just that that's a little different because I had shelter. I didn't have to work and pay bills. But when you have to pay for shelter, have bills, have to go to work, and then you have a crying baby and you have to change diapers, and it's not the same thing. So you better just be aware of that and realize that your world is going to turn upside down when you have a kid. It's not going to be the same thing. Your life is not going to be the same. You need to be okay with that. And you can't be angry at the baby you decide to have. It's not their fault. You chose to have them. The next one on the list is that you should consider before having a child. It says, if I had a difficult or abusive childhood, I have had therapy that healed me enough, to enjoy life more and feel more in control. I definitely had an abusive childhood, and I did not have therapy or healed. My therapist and I both believe that I have healed enough to be able to enjoy parenting and do it well. First of all, I didn't have a therapist until now in my 40s. I definitely had some unhealed trauma, and I ended up having children. So if you're having a child, there's a reason why this is on the checklist, why Merle put this on the checklist. And I could attest to that because I didn't get healed prior to having my children, and it didn't turn out so good because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. Anything that my children were going through, it was just too much for me because I was already not able to deal with what I was going through, and then I had to deal with what they were going through. It was just becoming too much. So if you could let that out with a therapist and work through and learn how to deal with your depression and anxiety and anger, it's going to be so much better for you and your child. The next thing it talks about, and this one's a little bit long, but nevertheless it's important to consider before you have a child. It says, I do not try to deny problems, which I used to, with a stiff upper lip, false cheeriness, or unrealistic beliefs that I can make anything happen. I can acknowledge my own and others' suffering. This is very important because I looked at my child, the way I was raising my children, as they had it easy, because I was comparing it to my childhood. So whenever my first daughter started complaining about things, I was like, you need to toughen up. At least this and this and that and the third didn't happen to you. And that is not right. You should listen and acknowledge what they're going through, because although they didn't have it as bad as you, it doesn't mean they're not going through something bad with you as a parent. So listen to them. Try to put yourself in their shoes. What if you had a depressed mom that cried all the time? What if you had a mom that was angry at everything you say and not listen to you? Wouldn't you want a mother that didn't do those things? So be the mother you would have wanted, and just acknowledge their feelings. And it says, and deal with these caring and compassion. Don't, like I said, don't lash out and be like, oh, you just need to toughen up. No, deal with them with caring and compassion. That's what makes your kids later open up to you, and they realize that you actually love them and you want to listen to what they have to say, and you're not going to pass judgment for anything. I could therefore be present with my child even during bad moods. I couldn't do that. I couldn't handle it. I was dealing with my own stuff that I hadn't healed from, which are part of life. Bad moods are a part of life. I understand that respecting my child's moods is an important part of her self-esteem and learning to cope. Even though correction, discipline, and moral education are crucial, which I talk about, that the Triple P parenting class talks about. If you guys go to my Triple P parenting episode, you will learn what classes I'm talking about. They show you that correction and discipline are necessary, but there are ways other than hitting and screaming at your children that you could teach them discipline. They are crucial. I have a sense that I can accept the child and correct the behavior. So basically accept your child the way they are and just correct the behavior in the right way without hitting or any of raising your voice. And it goes on to say, if I am in a relationship, I can accept and emphasize with my partner's suffering. So when I had my first child with my ex-husband, he didn't participate in anything. So, and whenever I would tell him, how hard this was, I'm working, I'm coming home, or I'm going to school. If I was at college at the time, I'm cleaning the dishes, I'm doing everything. And empathize with me. If you find someone that's not like that, especially if you guys are still dating with little things, he or she is not gonna be empathetic with you whenever you're trying to raise a kid together. So watch out for that. Another thing you should in the checklist that you should consider that Merle has on her book and her website is, I'm capable of apologizing. And this is one thing I had a problem with big time, and I finally did apologize to my children. I am capable of apologizing, giving sincere compliments, and negotiating. I did used to pay my daughter's compliments. So the next one is, I do not assume that I can mold a child according to my desires and expectations. That's one thing I talked about in my previous episode, is that a lot of times, this is true, we try to mold our children to becoming how we are, kind of to be like a twin. I don't know, like not a twin, because even twins act differently, but we want them to act like us. And I don't understand why we do that, because if you look at your siblings, you see that all of y'all are different. Everyone's character is different. So I don't know why we try to do that. And that's not good to do, because then you don't see how son or daughter are going to turn out. And that's what makes life so fun and interesting. If we were all the same, it would just be really boring. So it goes on to say, I am interested and curious in the personality and interest my child will turn out to have as a unique being separate from me and my partner. And it's so fun, honestly. Like when I finally took the parenting class, it's just so fun to see their character just brought out to life. It honestly is. Like one of my daughters, she just makes me crack up. You know, they both make me laugh. But one makes me crack up. Another one's creative. They're actually both creative. You know, they both like to sing. One loves to sing. That's what she wants her career to be. But she's definitely creative. So like when I don't see the finishing product of something, she'll see it. You know, she knows how to decorate. She knows how to dress. She knows about style. And it's just so fun to see their character come out. So why get in the way of that? The next thing it talks about to consider before having children is I am comfortable with physical affection such as hugs and gentle touch. This is so important because, and I think my mom, learning more about my mom, I realized why she was like this. But when I was a child, my mom showed me a lot of affection and a lot of hugs. You know, she used to play with my hair and just a lot more affection. And then when I became a preteen, it's like the hugs stopped. You know, it was more like, good morning, how was your day, good night. And when I grew up, it was hard for literally when people would hug me, I would just put my arms like this and cringe, like, why are you doing this? Why are we doing this right now? Why are you hugging me? This is weird. And I had to get out of that. And I did the same thing with my children when they were children and babies and up to they were preteen. I would hug them. You know, I would show them a lot of affection. The time they became preteens, I kind of stopped all that. And especially my oldest daughter, she always liked, you know, hugs. And sometimes she'll like holding my hand. And I regret that now. But I'm glad I became aware of it because I started forcing myself to be more affectionate. But make sure that you don't mind affection. And if you do, try to figure out why. What happened in your life that you're not affectionate anymore? Because children need that. They need that physical touch. They need those hugs. They need to know that they're going to get a hug from mom if something went wrong in school or if they just want to be held. The next one it talks about is if I or we are disappointed in our child or in parenthood, we know that some of this is normal and would seek support from family or friends as well as therapy. So sometimes it becomes so hard. You do get disappointed in your child if they did something. You think you're just the worst parent because what are you doing wrong? Your child is doing this, and you're like, why did I even become a parent to begin with? What is it becomes discouraging. So you need that support group to talk to them, and if you need to see a therapist, go see one. The next one. It's talking about it. Even if my partner would have preferred to be child-free, she finds enough that is attractive about parenting, in addition to pleasing me, that he or she is ready to make these sacrifices. So if the other partner wants to be child-free, that Merle talks about this in the book, it doesn't necessarily mean that for the rest of your marriage or the time you're together that you're going to be child-free. Sometimes people change their mind. Sometimes at the time, you're just not ready. You might be focused on your career and try to save more money and try to do more things before you bring a child to this world. But if a person is just having a child, and sometimes we do it to where we give them the other person an ultimatum, or we know that the other person's not going to say no. You kind of know your partner, so eventually they're going to start resenting you and the child. And what is that going to accomplish? It's just going to bring a child to this world that's going to be unloved by one parent. And it's going to bring a lot of stress into the relationship and even make it to where y'all break up because of it. And how is that helping anybody at all? This one's very important. I am not addicted to alcohol, drugs, including prescription drugs, sex, gambling, or spending. See, a lot of us think about the big ones, gambling, drugs, alcohol, but you don't think about the spending. I often listen to the Dave Ramsey podcast, and I hear both men and women call in because their husband or wife has opened up a credit card they didn't know about, or a couple of credit cards they didn't know about. And I do believe that a lot of those people knew that their better half, or the person they fell in love with, had a spending problem. They just thought maybe they were going to fix them when they got married. I don't know. I mean, we all think we're going to fix somebody, right? That doesn't happen. I mean, it just gets worse. So yeah, because if you have someone that spends a lot, and if you think, and I'm going to have an episode about this, of how much it costs to really have a child, they're going to spend it all on, I don't know, clothes or whatever else, and you're not even going to have money for daycare or simple things like clothes for your children, because they don't spend everything up. And the same thing with alcohol and drugs. I mean, that my ex-husband, he was doing drugs, and he would bring people to the, not inside our house, but it was in our house. We had a detached garage where he would just go out there and do the drugs. And I had to end up leaving him because he put my girls and I in a very dangerous situation. And I didn't want anything illegal happening in my house, because if you think about it, if the police comes to your house and you said you didn't have nothing to do with it, but that was in your house, you guys are sharing that home, the police is not going to buy that. So all you have is two parents now in jail, and their children, either with family members or social services. You can't have that around your kids. And if you're struggling yourself with this, please get some help. Do not have children, please. So Merle goes on to explain that if these have been a problem, the drugs, the gambling, in the past, I have been free of this for a few years, and I'm under the care of a doctor, mental health professional like Merle, and or 12-step program I attend regularly. The last one on the list, it says, if in a relationship, my partner and I enjoy each other's company most of the time, we are able to disagree and resolve conflicts. We do not experience uncontrollable anger, violence, or days or weeks of silence. We are not isolated, but have friends or family or community groups we spend time with. And Merle mentions this family and community again, and this is so important. A mom or a father is not meant to do this thing by themselves. It takes a tribe to raise a child. It really does. A lot of time, children would rather speak with their aunt or a family friend about something that they don't feel comfortable speaking to their parents about, or their grandparents. It's so important for that child to know that they have somebody else they could go to that is trustworthy, to be able to do that, or the mom to have someone that she trusts to leave the child with, just so she could get some alone time. And guys, if your finances are bad, there's so many resources out there on teaching you how to get out of debt, create a budget, how to save for an emergency fund. I talked about, I think it was in my suicide prevention episode, I talked about Dave Ramsey and his Total Money Makeover book, the Financial Peace University, which has been upgraded. And there's also a website called Our Rich Journey, which I'll also link again to this description below. It's so important to have your finances straight and have a good nest egg put away before you have a child. Because being in love doesn't fix you being broke. A lot of people say, well, let's have children and then we'll figure it out later. That doesn't work like that. It just makes everything worse, and then it just makes you more broke. In Merle's book, The Baby Decision, she also talks about how to think about the things that you believe your parents did wrong and what they did right, because it's helped you become better parents. And my advice is to make a list of the things that your parents did wrong and just kind of keep it away and tucked away in a dresser somewhere. And if you think you solved something wrong with your child, just go back to that list and look at it, just as a reminder, and maybe put down some of the feelings that you were feeling when you were younger, when your parents did that. I think that is a great tool to have. Whenever I read that in the book that Merle put that, I just thought about that list, what has my parents done wrong and right, And if they've done something, the things they did right, just repeat those things. And sometimes, some of us didn't have a good example of parenting from our parents, but maybe we've seen some family friends or maybe aunts and uncles that did have good examples of parenting that you liked, that you want to model after. So think about those as well. And another thing I wanted to talk about is these adults, especially adults that have already had children. This really makes me angry when I hear them pressuring young adults to have children. Stop pressuring people to have children. If you want to do them a favor, give them the book like The Baby Decision, so that way they could learn how to be prepared before they have a baby. Don't sit up there and say, when are you going to have a baby? Oh my gosh, you're already 24. You don't have a kid. You need to hurry up. You're getting old. Stop doing that. All you're doing is bringing more children into this world that are going to come to a home with unprepared parents that's going to cause them trauma. That's all you're doing. Another thing Merle talks about is if you're undecided whether you want a child or not, go be around other children. If your sister or friend has a baby, go hang out at their house to see what they have to do every day. Take a day off even with them right after they have the child to help them out. Just kind of see what it all goes into. Talk to them. Ask them how much they're spending on daycare. Ask them how much they're spending on diapers, and so on and so forth. That, like I said, whenever I was trying to educate myself and trying to build a career, I researched all that. But when it came to having a baby, I didn't do any of it. And that's more important than an education. That's a whole human being you're bringing into this earth that you want to love and treat right and mold into a happy and healthy adult that you're going to love the rest of your life. And another thing Merle talks about in The Baby Decision is, are you ready to give up your freedom? Think about that. Right now, you're able to get up whenever you want, especially on the weekends when you don't have to work. And if you want to go to the coffee shop, you'll go to the coffee shop. If you want to go out with your friends, you'll go out with your friends. If you have a baby, you have to pack up the baby bag. You have to bring out the stroller. You have to make sure you have enough milk. You have to have a milk warmer so that way the baby would drink it because they like warm milk. All these things you have to think about. And then when you get there, the baby might be crying. It gets to the point sometimes where you don't even want to leave the house, especially in the first year. So think about those things, because if you don't think about them and then you still want to do those things and go out with your friends and stuff, you're gonna resent your child and be mad and take it out on them. So make sure you get all that out of your system. There's no rush to have a child. I really recommend buying this book. Merle explains a lot better than me all these situations and why that is. There's really no reason to have a child so young. As a matter of fact, I listened to Merle in a podcast. It's called the Liz Moody Podcast, and I'll put this episode in the description below, but it's called the Liz Moody Podcast. And Merle, in this podcast that she's interviewed in, she says that she believes the best age to have a child is 38 years old or 39. Go check that out and see why she thinks that. And I agree with her. I happen to agree with her. I wish I would have listened to that because it made so much sense the way she explained it. And I would have been so much more mature and so much more ready. And I would have had so much more love to give to my children. And I would have been mentally healthy to be able to raise them better and give them a happier environment. So I highly recommend you get The Baby Decision and look for Merle's book next year. How about you? Do you have any other advice that you should consider before having a child? Comment below. And please share this with somebody that might benefit from it. Also, I forgot to talk about a Reddit group that Merle mentioned. If you're on the fence, basically, whether to have a child or not, you should go out there. There's some people that have already had children, some people that are still child-free. And there's a lot of good advice out there that you might be able to use to help you make the decision whether to have a child or not. It's a Reddit group called the Fence Sitter. Go ahead and add yourself to that group and start looking at the comments and all the things that people are saying. If you have a question, Merle says that she also hangs out there and answers questions sometimes. But you could also reach her on her website at thebabydecision.com. And next episode, I'm going to talk about how much it costs to have a child. So stay tuned for that one. I love you guys, and I thank you for your support. Please share this with somebody that might benefit. Thank you.
Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I've got my own issues. I need a comb to get through. Don't need to groan with you. Just go get your own tissue.